it's a very exciting time in the career of Tim Tszyu, and what they want to do is bring an international opponent and a former world champion out here to Australia to fight against Tim Tszyu in September. So the world title fight is happening on Sunday week. You'll see that live on Fox Sports between Charlo and also Brian Castano, but it's unlikely that Tim will be able to get either of those out here in quick time for September, so they'll probably look towards that at the end of the year. In the meantime, they want to bring out a significant international opponent, and there's a number of names that are in the mix. Jack Calcay is a former world champion. He's from Germany, so they're interested in him. He's the world number 2 at the moment. Danny Garcia won world titles at super lightweight and welterweight as well. He's making a move up to super welterweight, so they're interested in getting him to Australia, but it might work out to be a little bit difficult. So the two main options are Tony Harrison, who's an American, a former world champion, the only man ever to have beaten Charlo and still ranked in the top 6 in the world as well. He's an American, a really, really good fighter who has that huge win against Charlo. So great test for Tim Tszyu if they could get Harrison out here to Australia to take him on. The other one who is front and centre is Liam Smith, a former world champion who in fact held the WBO version of the belt. He's an Englishman, a really good fighter. He's taken on the likes of Canelo Alvarez before, but he's won some major fights internationally and a really, really strong fighter who would provide a really good test to see exactly where Tim Tszyu is at, because we've seen him demolish the domestic scene and a couple of internationals as well. We know he is very, very good, but the world will really start to take notice when he takes on these sorts of fighters. So they're hoping to get one of those guys out here to Australia in September for his next big fight.
All right, just a little less, just a very little less than a week ago, Tim Tszyu defeated a late step-in welterweight fighter by the name of junior welterweight fighter, 140-pound fighter who, don't get me started, by the name of Steve Spark, put on a spirited effort for as long as he could, but eventually getting stopped. What round was that, Big J? Round 4? Forgot.
No, mate, round 3.
Round 3.
Round 3.
Yeah, body
Got
shots.
something round 3.
So please take a time out, like the video, subscribe, and TstreeT Controversy with FightView360.com. Tim Tszyu wants to return in September. And to be honest, listening to those names that Ben Damon of Main Event and Fox Sports over in Australia mentioned, unless I don't see Tony Harrison going over to Australia. Maybe if Tim Tszyu comes over here to the States, it's possible. Jack Calcay, okay, maybe he'll go to Australia, but we're going to talk about him a little later on in the video. And then you have Liam Smith, who I'm going to read some quotes from right now. He did an interview with the Boxing Social, and this is what he said. Yeah, my management team are discussing it now, and I'll leave it to them and whoever else. If there's a deal there to be made, I'm sure it'll be made, Smith told Boxing Social. From my point of view, I think there's no questions will be asked of whether I would fight him or whether I'd come to Australia to fight him. I'd fight him tomorrow. I'd fly to Australia tomorrow as long as the deal was right. Whether it was to do with the mention of me, whether it was people saying to take the fight, pussy, it's like, how could you be mentioned? How could that be mentioned towards myself? So basically, I'm guessing he was talking about the fans that have pretty much been getting on Liam Smith about the hype of Tim Tszyu. You know what, Big J, I'm going to let you take it away from here. What do you think about the names that Ben Damon has mentioned, or the names that he could possibly fight? And who would you want to see?
Well, personally, I'd like to see none of them. I want to see him fight the Russian, Kurbanov, who's the number 2 ranked at the WBO, just below Tim Tszyu, who Tim Tszyu went into a fair bit of length the other day when they were talking at the post-fight interview after he sparked out Stevie Spark. That's who I want to see him fight. All these other guys, with the exception of Danny Garcia, actually are completely credible. Liam Smith, credible fighter, former WBO 154 champion. Jack Calcay, former champion, ranked number 2 at the IBF, credible opponent. Tony Harrison, got the win over Charlo, even though everyone disputed it, such as your good self. Credible opponent. Any one of those opponents would be a credible win for Tim Tszyu. But the problem is that he wants to fight in September, right? That's less than 2 months away. What fighter in their right mind would come to Australia full well knowing they have to do a 2-week quarantine lockdown, right? And they wouldn't even get into Sydney, considering Sydney's in lockdown at the moment with COVID issues. So they'd have to go to some different state, most likely Melbourne or Queensland or Brisbane and Queensland, do a 2-week quarantine, get maybe a month training in, and then have a fight against Tim Tszyu, who would be preparing the entire time. No one in their right mind would do that. That would give Tim Tszyu such a ridiculous advantage that, I really don't see anyone coming here in that time frame. Tim Tszyu really needs to just quit all this coming to Australia shit, go overseas just like everybody else, because the Maloney's going back over, George is over there now, Ebony's, I think, in Philly. There's plenty of Australians that go overseas to chasing their titles. What makes Tim Tszyu so special? So getting international talent here, I don't think it's going to happen. But Liam Smith said he'd want to get on the plane tomorrow. Well, he needs to get on the bloody plane in order to do his quarantine and have a half-decent training camp. So
yeah, for real.
Yeah, I don't see any of that happening. I really don't. I mean, if Tim gets any of those names here, yep, okay. And with the exception of Danny Garcia, they're all credible opponents. You can't really knock him for fighting any of those because they're all credible opponents at 154.
Yeah,
who would I like to see him fight the most? The Russian. That's who I wanted to see fight, the Russian.
And let me break down the division for you guys really quickly. So you have Jamel Charlo. I've been doing in-depth coverage on him all week. I did a whole hour stream on why he's not ranked by pound for pound by the Ring Magazine or ESPN yet. Go check out that video. He is currently the WBC, WBA Super, IBF, and Ring Magazine 154-pound super welterweight or junior middleweight champion. He's going to be taking on WBO champion Brian Castano on Showtime Championship Boxing this weekend at 9 p.m., July the 17th. This fight is televised over there, Big J, in Australia.
Yeah, if Tim Tszyu fights, it'll be on Main Event, yeah, for sure, as it normally is. So yeah,
no, I'm talking about Charlo Castano.
Yeah, I think it's channel 507 Fox Sports, kicking off at 11 a.m.
Yeah, it'll be the first.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
it'll be the first ever undisputed in the 4-belt era since I believe Ricky Wright, I believe. And here's how it lines up for those who don't know. Now, Tim Tszyu is trying to get a shot at the winner of Charlo versus Castano, hoping that it's Charlo. Tim Tszyu is not going to get a title shot unless he's chosen. To be honest with you, I don't see Charlo or Castano fighting him unless Tim Tszyu's ordered or mandated to fight him. Now, let me break it down to you. A guy by the name of Bakhram Murtazaliev is on the undercard versus Charlo versus Castano this weekend, taking on a fighter by the name of Kyrie Gray. Excuse me if I pronounce your first name wrong. I don't know if it's Kyrie or Kyrie Gray. He is the IBF mandatory. He gets first dibs no matter what. The winner of Charlo versus Castano, and I did research, and I talked to some credible people who follow the rankings, and you can see my website, FightView360.com. We have him there, number one. When you're ranked number one by the IBF, they're the only sanctioning body that does this. That means you are the mandatory. You can be ranked sometimes by the WBC, WBA, WBO, and not be the mandatory. But when IBF, you are the mandatory. He is the mandatory. The winner of Charlo Castano has to fight Murtazaliev, and then they have to fight Erickson Lubin. And then after that is the WBO mandatory, which Tim Tszyu is chasing. So right now, if Tim Tszyu were to keep winning this fight, and it's looking like he would have to have at least 3 fights before then, he won't be getting a title shot until the fall of 2022, maybe. Depends. So looking at the fighters that he's trying to fight and looking at what Big J was talking about, the quarantine, Al Heyman is not going to handicap his fighter, Tony Harrison, and ship Tony Harrison over to Australia and then have to quarantine the fight. And no, Tony Harrison from Detroit, I don't see it. Michael Demed and Kurbanov, why would they do that? That makes no sense. But they can just wait for the WBO to order him to fight Tim Tszyu. Liam Smith, okay, he seems as though he's open to the idea to go over there and possibly set up a hype job and get some easy money. But Jack Kouquet seems as though a more logical option. I think they will go after Jack Kouquet, whose last fight was in August of 2020 against Abbas Barayu that he won via split decision, by the way. 35 years old, smaller fighter at about 5'7". I covered his fight and seen multiple fights of his. I covered when he fought Sergey Derevinchenko and lost, and also when he fought Salusky and lost, and Demetrius Andrade. I covered all 3 of those fights. So who do you think is the logical opponent, for Tim Tszyu going forward? Like, who do you think they're going to pick if they're going to fight in September?
Probably, honestly, it's going to be between Jack Couquet and Liam Smith, because Liam Smith has expressed his interest in the fight. But we've heard nothing from Jack Couquet if he's interested, if anything's going on. His name's been mentioned, but there's been no in-depth talks. Yeah, no video evidence, nothing like Liam Smith, who's pretty much said, yeah, I'll do it if the terms are correct, I'll come over. So you'd have to go with Liam Smith. And they're completely credible for Tim Tszyu, would give him a good test. But then again, 2 weeks quarantine and only, 4.5 weeks maximum training camp? Who would agree to that?
Do you know the date that they're shopping? What's the date in September?
September 8th. September 8th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, September. So yeah, Tim Tszyu wants someone to come over here, or Tim Tszyu's team wants someone to come over here with fuck all preparation after a 2-week quarantine. So, that speaks volumes.
Ridiculous.
Why not let someone, have a proper 10-week training camp, then fight him? Not a 4-week training camp.
Not even an 8-week training camp. Like, that's the tradition now, the 8-week.
Exactly, because they will be in lockdown for 2 weeks. Sydney, as I said, is the red zone. So Sydney's in New South Wales is in lockdown. You can't go to New South Wales. You have to go to Queensland or one of the other states, Victoria, to do your quarantine and training and all that. Can't do anything in New South Wales at the moment. It's lockdown. So I think that in itself would probably, his team would do research. Well, they've got quarantine problems. Probably better not go to Australia.
And
so I don't see it happening in that time frame.
And remember what we talked about. They don't have a stateside or international promoter help. Tim Tszyu is not getting no fights on September the 8th here in the States. He's probably not getting no fight. He probably wouldn't get a fight September the 8th in the UK. So they want somebody to come over there. Crazy.
Yeah, he would have more. And another thing is that, as we talked about before we started recording, is that people are starting to wise up to Tim Tszyu.
Mm-hmm.
Is that his opponents aren't as credible. The hype is not warranted.
His fans and main event, they're writing checks that his ass can't cash.
And people are starting to turn on him. And people are starting to call him out and go, well, you're only fighting blown-up welterweights in a super lightweight. What makes you think you can beat Charlo?
It's no disrespect to Tim Tszyu, but we're looking at his resume right here on the screen. Okay, Dennis Hogan coming off of a long layoff and coming off of 2 battles, one in which he got beat up. Jeff Horn, who didn't have a voice, who was sick prior. We got a media call with Jeff Horn is sounding sick. Let's just go ahead and say it. And Jeff Horn battle-torn. The Pacquiao fight, even though he won on paper, whatever you want to say. We're not going to argue that right now. The 2 Mixer-Raffas fights, the Terrence Crawford fight. And as you said, I'm starting to look at the vulture mentality of, Tim Tszyu's team. I'm not going to blame him. Yes, they're getting him to sell out arenas and put on big shows, over in Australia. But if you look at his resume, he hasn't really done shit for his fans. And I know they're going to be here. Once again, we're here to report the news. He hasn't done anything for me or my colleague, and I believe he feels the same way, for us to say, yo, Tim Tszyu is a world contender. He can beat Charlo. But fighting a Liam Smith, yes, that would make me think, oh, okay, all right. Fighting a Russian Kurbanov, I'm like, all right, okay, Tim Tszyu, you getting there.
Even Jack Couquet is completely credible, even though he's a weaker
even Jack Couquet, I'm like, all right, cool, a former world champion he got under his belt now.
All those opponents are completely credible. He needs to stay as far away from Danny Garcia as possible. Don't even entertain that, because they'll just make him look bad. But any Liam Smith, Magomed Kurbanov, what's the other Russian bloke's name, the IBF number 1?
Bakram Murtazaliev.
yeah, if by some miracle he can get him, that's even more credible. So
Yeah,
any of those
then
names,
they've already, and then Ben Damon of Main Event already said, and he's considered an inside source, that they're looking to work with the PBC side.
yeah,
And Bakram
completely,
Martinzaliev is a PBC fighter currently right now.
so completely credible. But people, I mean, let me say this: his two most credible fights at 154 are Dennis Hogan and Dwight Ritchie. That's it.
You're not counting
On
Jeff
a
Horn?
world class. Jeff Horn was a blown up welterweight. Never fought 154 in his life. How can you count Jeff Horn?
Well, yeah, he was.
He never fought at 154.
Yeah.
Blown up. Yeah, okay. He went from 147, fought Mundine at 157, had 2 wars with Mick Zarafa, never fought at 154. So how can you count?
Yeah.
I would put Horn in the same category as Danny Garcia. Hell of a fighter, but a 147er.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Never fought at 154. So how can you put him in that category?
All right.
So, and those are the facts. Those are the facts. So, and Dwight Ritchie, if you go back and watch that fight, Dwight got a cut on above his eye. He had blood coming into his eye for 10 rounds of that fight. So, you know, it's like, yeah, I've been screaming this for a year that we get Tim Tszyu crammed down our throats by Main Event, completely unwarranted. I mean, especially his last fight. His last fight was not doing him any favours. Zarafa wasn't a ranked contender in the first place. Then it gets replaced by a blown-up 140er, and now the people are starting to turn on him because they're realising, hang on a second, this bloke's not doing what he should, which I've been saying for how long have I been beating this drum for? A year?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's time for him now to really forget about bringing international talent to Australia. That's not going to happen. Go overseas and prove himself over there. That's the only thing he can do if he wants
right
to.
Now, it's the time.
Gain credibility. Gain credibility because, you know, as you said, you know, they're writing checks that he just can't cash.
Yeah, like you know, my closing thought is, look at what Dylan White's been doing before he got the WBC interim. He was fighting the best fighters that were available to him, that were fighting. You know, arguably one of the best fighters, you know, right now, really best resume, even though he did lose to the Povetkin, you know, that in Joshua that didn't win a championship or a legitimate championship. But since we're short on time, please take your time out, like the video and subscribe if you haven't. Of course, Tim Tszyu's fight and every fight after and until probably he retires. We're going to cover them all. I'm TstreeT Controversy and Big J. This is FightView3CT.com. Please subscribe.